The twin suns of planet Vorsa burned over the dusty mining fields. The air shimmered with heat, and the ground shook every time the drills hit the iron rocks below. Thousands of slaves worked there, silent, broken, and hopeless. But among them was one who was not like the others. They called him the Wild One. Some whispered another name, the Caged Beast. He was taller than any creature they had ever seen. His skin was dark gray, marked with glowing blue veins that pulsed like lightning under the surface. His eyes, cold and golden, could make even armed guards step back. No one dared to speak to him. No one even dared to look at him for long. They said he was dangerous. They said he was mad. But deep inside, he was something far more powerful and far more tragic. The Caged Beast had been a slave for years. No one knew where he came from. He never spoke. He worked when ordered, fought when beaten, and survived every punishment they gave him. There were rumors that once, long ago, he had killed 10 guards with his bare hands. Some said he was not even a slave, but a weapon, something the overlords were too afraid to destroy and too proud to free. On this day, a new transport ship arrived at the camp. From it came a group of human officers who worked under the alien overlords. Among them was Captain Eli Vance, a man known for following rules but never enjoying them. He was sent to inspect the mining camps and report back on production levels. But when he entered the slave compound, his eyes caught something that made him stop. There, behind thick energy bars, stood the Wild One. His head was bowed, but Eli could feel the strength in his silence. When the creature looked up, their eyes met for a moment, and Eli felt something strange. It wasn't fear. It was recognition. The alien's gaze was not wild. It was full of intelligence and pain. "Keep your distance, Captain," one of the alien guards hissed. "That thing isn't safe. We keep him alive only because he works harder than 10 men. Eli nodded, but he couldn't look away. "What's his name?" he asked. The guard smirked. "He doesn't have one. He's not one of us," but the word stayed in Eli's mind. Not one of us. There was something cruel in that sentence, something that didn't sit right with him. He decided to find out more. That night, the desert winds screamed across the camp. Eli couldn't sleep. From his quarters, he watched the slave pens through the glass window. The Wild One was still awake, sitting quietly in the corner of his cage, staring at the stars above. There was no madness in his eyes now, only memory. Eli wondered what those memories were. Did he have a family, a home, or had those golden eyes always known only chains and pain? Suddenly, the alarm blared. One of the mining tunnels had collapsed, trapping dozens of slaves inside. Eli rushed out shouting orders. The guards panicked, unsure how to respond. But before anyone could act, a loud roar echoed through the night, a roar that shook the walls. The Caged Beast had broken his chains. Everyone froze as he moved, fast, strong, unstoppable. He lifted giant stones as if they were paper. Dust and fire filled the air. Within minutes, he pulled out every trapped slave and placed them safely outside the wreck. No one spoke. No one dared to. When the job was done, the Wild One turned to face Eli. Their eyes met again. Then without a word, he walked back to his cage and sat down, waiting for the guards to chain him again. Eli's heart pounded. He had seen courage before, but nothing like this. The alien had saved lives, the same lives that had mocked and feared him. Why? Later that night, as the storm quieted, Eli walked to the cage. "Why did you help them?" he asked softly. The alien did not answer. But for the first time, his golden eyes moved toward Eli, and in a deep, rough voice, he said one word. "Because they are life." Eli stepped back, shocked. The creature could speak. He understood everything. Before Eli could reply, a guard shouted at him to move away. But Eli's thoughts were already racing. The Wild One was not a beast, he was something else, something more. As Eli walked away, the guard muttered under his breath, "If that thing ever escapes, this planet will burn." Eli glanced back one last time. Inside the cage, the creature looked up at the stars again. His chains glowed in the moonlight, but his eyes burned brighter. Somewhere deep inside, the storm was already rising. The slaves feared him. The guards hated him. But only Eli saw the truth. He wasn't the danger they thought he was. He was the warning they refused to hear. The next morning, the camp was silent. The slaves worked slower than usual, their eyes darting toward the cage in the far corner. Everyone was whispering about what had happened last night. The wild one, the caged beast who had saved them. No one understood why. No slave had ever helped another without orders. And yet he had done it without hesitation, without fear, without reward. Captain Eli Vance stood near the control tower, watching him again. The guards had doubled the energy fields around the cage, heavy metal cuffs now wrapped around the alien's arms, glowing with restraint codes. He sat there, calm as stone, as if the chains no longer mattered. Eli couldn't stop thinking about that one word. Life. It wasn't what a savage would say. It was what a philosopher might say. Who was this creature really? Later that day, Eli entered the control room. Commander Roth, a cold and cruel man, was reviewing reports. His silver eyes glowed with authority. "Vance," he said sharply, "I hear you were near the beast last night. That was not in your orders." "I was inspecting the damage," Eli replied. "He saved at least 20 workers. Without him, half the camp would be dead." Roth gave a short, dry laugh. "Slaves saving slaves. How poetic. But don't forget your place, Captain. It's a beast, a tool. We built this empire by breaking things like him." Eli clenched his jaw but said nothing. He left the room, his mind burning. There was something wrong about all this. The arrogance, the cruelty, the blindness. That night, while the guards drank and played cards, Eli sneaked back to the cage. The wild one was awake, staring at the sand outside the bars. The twin moons reflected in his golden eyes. "Can you understand me?" Eli asked quietly. For a moment, there was silence. Then slowly, the alien nodded. Eli stepped closer. "What's your name?" The alien hesitated. "Kale," he said finally, his voice deep, rough, and broken. "That was my name." Before the chains, Eli felt a chill. "Who chained you?" Kale looked up. "Your masters. The ones who call themselves gods. They came from the stars, took my world, and made me a slave." His eyes darkened. "They fear what they destroyed. They fear what I remember." Eli didn't understand. "What do you remember?" Kale leaned forward slightly, his voice low but powerful. "Vorsa was once free. My people built cities of light and air. We guarded the skies. But when the conquerors came, they turned our power against us. They erased our name, our songs, our truth. Now only I remain." Eli's heart pounded. "You're saying this world belonged to your kind before the overlords arrived?" Kale nodded. "Yes, and they buried that truth deep under sand and lies." Before Eli could speak again, the sound of footsteps echoed nearby. He quickly stepped back into the shadows. A guard approached, checking the cage. Kale returned to silence, pretending not to notice. When the guard left, Kale whispered, "You should not come here, human. They will not forgive you." Eli smiled faintly. "Maybe I don't care." Kale tilted his head. "Then you are not like them." A storm rolled in that night, a violent sandstorm that swallowed the camp. The wind howled through every gap and crevice. Tents ripped apart, towers shook, and power lines sparked. The guards scrambled to secure the main generator. Then came the explosion. A lightning bolt hit one of the fuel cells, setting off a chain reaction. Fire lit up the sky. Slaves screamed and ran for cover. The energy cages flickered for a moment, and Kale's restraints broke free. Eli rushed out into the storm, shouting orders. "Get the slaves inside, move!" The air was full of dust and burning metal. Then he saw Kale walking through the chaos, his body glowing faintly blue. A heavy metal beam crashed from above. Eli fell backward, but Kale caught it with one hand. He lifted it like a stick and threw it aside. The firelight reflected in his golden eyes. Eli gasped for breath. You saved me." Kyle looked down at him. "You saved me first. We are even." Eli watched as Kale stepped through the flames, carrying injured slaves one by one to safety. Every movement was precise, controlled. Not wild, not savage. There was purpose in his strength, a mind guiding every motion. By dawn, the storm had passed. Half the camp was destroyed, but the slaves were alive. Commander Roth ordered Kale to be chained again, furious that a slave had touched a human officer. Eli protested, but Roth ignored him. "He's dangerous," the commander shouted. "If he remembers who he is, we're all dead." That night, as Kale sat in his cage once more, Eli approached him quietly. "Why do you keep saving them?" he asked. Kale looked up, his golden eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Because they fear me. But one day they will need me." He leaned forward, voice low like thunder. "And when that day comes, their fear will not save them." Eli felt the truth in those words. He didn't know it yet, but the chains that held Kale were already breaking. Not the ones made of metal, but the ones made of memory and fire. Somewhere deep inside the beast, the guardian of Vorsa was waking up, and the stars were watching. Days passed after the great sandstorm, but the camp was not the same. Half of it was still in ruins, and the rest stood in uneasy silence. The guards now watched the slaves with sharper eyes. Commander Roth had doubled the security around Kale's cage. Even the other slaves kept their distance, whispering about him like he was a spirit. Something not alive, not dead, but eternal. Captain Eli Vance, however, could not forget what he had seen. The image of Kale walking through fire, saving lives without fear, haunted him. It didn't make sense. The aliens called Kale a beast, yet Eli had seen more humanity in him than in any of his superiors. Eli's curiosity turned into obsession. Late at night, while others slept, he began to search the base archives. He hacked into old logs, ancient files, and forbidden records that had been sealed for decades. The data was scrambled, but one phrase kept appearing again and again. Project Vorsa, termination order, species X9. The more Eli read, the more his heart raced. It was all there, the truth buried under lies. Long before humans ever arrived on this planet, another race had lived here. A proud, advanced people who had built floating cities, harnessed energy from the stars, and protected the system from invaders. Their name had been wiped out, their symbols erased, but Eli recognized the description. The tall figures, the glowing veins, the golden eyes, Kale's people. The realization hit him like a shockwave. Kale wasn't a slave from another world. He was a native of Vorsa, the last of its true guardians. His kind had been betrayed, hunted, and enslaved by the same overlords who now ruled the galaxy. The wild beast was in fact the rightful protector of this world. Eli's mind burned with questions. If Kale's people had such power, why had they lost? What had the overlords feared so much that they needed to erase an entire civilization? But before he could search deeper, the door behind him slid open. "Looking for something, Captain?" Commander Roth's voice sliced through the dark. Eli froze. The commander stepped inside, eyes cold and shining. "Unauthorized access to the archives," Roth said. "You disappoint me, Vance. I expected better." Eli tried to stay calm. "Sir, I was only checking historical data. The reports about Kale don't add up." Roth smirked. "Ah, so it's the beast you're worried about. Let me save you some time. That thing is not a soldier. It's not a hero. It's a reminder, a warning of what happens when a species defies its masters." Eli's voice hardened. "Or maybe he's a reminder of what happens when people lose their souls." Roth's smile vanished. "Careful, Captain. Loyalty is thin ice." He turned and left, but his words stayed in the air like poison. Later that night, Eli went to see Kale again. The camp was quiet, and the moonlight painted silver shadows on the ground. Kale sat against the bars, his eyes half closed, but when Eli approached, he spoke without looking up. "You found it, didn't you?" Eli stopped, shocked. "Found what?" "The truth," Kale said softly. "About who I am. About who they were." Eli took a breath. "You knew I'd look." Kale's lips curled in a faint smile. "You are curious. That is dangerous here." Eli crouched near the bars. "Your people, they built this planet. The overlords destroyed everything. Why don't you fight back?" Kyle opened his eyes, glowing faintly in the dark. "Because to fight alone is to die alone. My chains are not only on my body, they are in the hearts of those who fear me." Eli frowned. "Then let me help you." Kale looked at him for a long time, silent, like he was searching the human soul. "Help me or help yourself?" Before Eli could answer, the alarm blared across the camp. Red lights flashed. A voice shouted through the intercom. "Security breach in the command tower. Unauthorized data access detected." Eli's blood went cold. They had traced his hacking attempt. Guards poured into the courtyard. Kyle stood up inside his cage, his eyes burning like fire. "They're coming for you," he said. Eli turned to run, but then stopped. "No, they're coming for us." He ran to the control post and slammed his hand against the override panel. The cage door hissed open. Kale stepped out, free for the first time in years. The ground trembled under his feet. He looked up at the night sky and whispered something in his own language, a sound that made the air vibrate. The guards opened fire. Energy bolts flashed. Kale moved like lightning, disarming one guard and throwing another aside. Eli ducked behind a transport pod, shouting, "This way!" They escaped through the storm tunnels beneath the camp, running through shadows and fire. The air was filled with alarms and sirens. When they finally stopped in an old cave outside the camp, Cale touched the wall. Ancient markings began to glow under his hand. Symbols of his people. Eli stared in awe. "What is this place?" Cale turned to him slowly, eyes blazing. "This is where the truth begins, and where everything ends." He stepped deeper into the glowing chamber. "The overlords buried their shame under this planet, but the planet remembers, and soon it will awaken." The cave shook slightly as a low hum rose from the ground, like the heartbeat of something sleeping deep beneath the surface. Eli realized then that Cale's fight was not just for freedom. It was for the soul of an entire world, and the world was starting to remember him. The wind howled through the Vorsa desert as two figures moved through the darkness. One human, one alien. Eli and Cale had been running for days, hiding in the old tunnels beneath the wastelands. Above them, search drones cut across the sky like angry insects, their red lights hunting for any trace of escape. The camp had fallen into chaos after Cale's breakout. Commander Roth had declared both fugitives enemies of the Empire, but deep below the surface, something was changing. The slaves whispered in secret now, about the wild one who broke his chains and the human who helped him. For the first time in years, hope began to grow like fire in dry grass. Inside the ancient caves, Kyle stood before a glowing wall of symbols. His hand hovered above the markings that pulsed like living veins. "These are memories," he said softly. "My people stored them here before they died." Stories, strength, and fire. Eli watched in awe. The light reflected off Cale's face, making him look almost godlike. "Can you use them?" he asked. Cale nodded. "If I awaken the core, it will call the old power, the same power that built this world. But it will also draw the overlords." Eli frowned. "Then we'll be ready." Kyle turned his golden eyes toward him. "You speak like a soldier, but are you ready to die like one?" Eli didn't answer. He didn't need to. He had already made his choice. Meanwhile, in the mining camp, Commander Roth's fury burned brighter than ever. He stood before his troops, his metal armor gleaming under the harsh lights. "Find them," he roared. "Burn the tunnels. Search every rock, every shadow. That creature is not a man, he's a weapon, and I will end him myself." As the guards marched out, a few slaves exchanged glances. They had seen what Cale had done, how he'd lifted steel and flame, how he'd saved the weak while the strong watched. The slaves had lived too long in silence. Now something inside them stirred. That night, as the guards slept, whispers passed through the camps. Quiet words became plans, a stolen weapon, a hidden tunnel, a promise. "When the Wild One returns, we rise." Back in the caves, Eli and Cale were not alone anymore. Groups of slaves had begun to find them, following the rumors. Men and women, scarred and thin, came crawling through the tunnels to join them. Some brought stolen blasters, others carried nothing but tool, but all carried faith. Eli looked at them in disbelief. "They came for you," he said. Cale shook his head. "No, they came for freedom." He stepped forward, his voice echoing off the stone. "You were born in chains, but the sky was never theirs to give. The fire in your blood is older than their stars. Tonight we rise not as slaves, but as shadows they cannot kill." The crowd roared, fists raised. Even Eli felt the energy surge through him. He saw it now. Cale wasn't just a survivor. He was a symbol, the spark that could burn an empire. As dawn broke, the revolt began. The first explosion hit the generator station, plunging the camp into darkness. The slaves attacked from all sides, using the tunnels to move unseen. The guards panicked, firing blindly into the smoke. Kyle led from the front, his strength unstoppable. Energy blasts struck his skin but seemed to fade against his body's blue glow. With every step, he tore through machines and armor like paper. Eli moved beside him, leading the human workers who had joined the uprising. He used his knowledge of the systems to disable drones and unlock cages. The air was filled with screams, metal, and fire, but also with something new. Freedom. Commander Roth arrived at the main gate, his face twisted with rage. "Kyle," he shouted. "You think you can undo centuries of rule with your fists?" Cale stepped out of the smoke, eyes blazing gold. "Not with fists," he said. "With truth." They charged at each other, man and monster, slave and tyrant, colliding like thunder. Roth's plasma blade struck, but Cale caught it in his bare hands, sparks flying. The ground cracked beneath them as they fought. Eli watched helplessly, shouting orders to his men to hold the line. Finally, with one powerful strike, Kyle threw Roth backward into a burning tower. The commander screamed as the flames rose around him. Kale turned away, his face unreadable, but victory came with a cost. The overlords had seen everything. From high above the clouds, massive ships began to descend, dark silhouettes against the twin suns. Eli looked up, eyes wide. "They're coming." Kyle's voice was calm but heavy. "The masters of the slavers. The real enemy." He turned to his fighters. This was not the end. It was the beginning. The ground trembled as the ships entered the atmosphere. Wind ripped across the desert, scattering dust and ashes. Kale raised his hand toward the sky. "Let them come," he said. "Vorsa will remember its sons." The slaves gathered around him, silent and strong. Above them, lightning streaked across the sky, a storm unlike any they had ever seen. The revolt had begun in darkness. Now it would be written in fire. The sky burned red over Vorsa. The battle in the mining camps was still raging. But everyone stopped when they saw the shadows in the clouds. Huge ships, dark as night, descending slowly through the smoke. Their engines roared like thunder, shaking the ground. Even the wind seemed to freeze in fear. Kale looked up at the ships, his golden eyes reflecting their light. "They are here," he said quietly. "The true masters." Eli stood beside him, heart pounding. "You mean the overlords? The ones who destroyed your people?" Kale nodded. "Yes, the slavers who control the galaxy are only their servants. These are the ones who made them." Around them, the rebels, humans and aliens alike, watched in silence. The hope that had burned in their hearts now flickered with doubt. Against guards and drones, they had fought bravely. But against starships, against gods, how could they win? Kale turned to them. "Fear will not save us. They come to erase what we have awakened. If we run, they will hunt us. If we fight, we may fall. But if we stand together, the stars themselves will remember us." His voice, deep and calm, carried through the camp. The crowd lifted their weapons, their fear slowly turning into resolve. The first ship landed outside the camp, crushing the sands beneath its metal weight. The air shimmered as a ramp lowered, and from it stepped tall figures wrapped in black armor. Their faces were hidden behind silver masks, and their eyes glowed white like burning suns. The leader of the group, a figure taller than Kale, raised his hand. "You," he said, his voice echoing like steel on stone. "The lost guardian of Vorsa, you should not exist." Kale stepped forward, unafraid. "And yet I do." The masked figure tilted his head. "Your kind were erased for a reason. You were dangerous. You believed life was free. You believed in balance. But balance is weakness. Power is truth." Kale's voice thundered in reply. "Power built on chains is not truth. It is fear." The ground cracked as energy flared around them. Golden light from Kale, white fire from the Overlord. The air hummed with tension as if the planet itself was holding its breath. Then the Overlord spoke again. "Surrender, and I will make your death quick." Kale smiled, a quiet, fearless smile. "You've already taken everything from me. There is nothing left to surrender." The Overlord raised his hand, and then the attack began. Beams of energy ripped through the sky. Drones swarmed down like locusts, firing at anything that moved. The ground soldiers opened fire, their weapons lighting up the desert. The rebels fought back fiercely. Explosions shook the camp, filling the air with dust and screams. Eli took command of the human fighters, leading them through the wreckage. "Hold the line. Protect the wounded," he shouted. He fired his blaster, hitting a drone midair, then ducked behind a metal barrier. Kale fought like a storm unleashed. Energy burned around his body, his hands glowing with blue fire. Every strike from him sent shockwaves through the battlefield. He tore through drones, shattered armor, and sent soldiers flying. But the overlords were powerful, too powerful. With a single gesture, they lifted whole machines into the air and crushed them like paper. One of them struck Kale with a blast of pure energy, throwing him across the sand. Eli ran to him, shouting his name. "Kale, get up!" Kale groaned, pushing himself to his knees. His veins glowed brighter, his eyes blazing gold. "They want to destroy this world to hide the truth," he said. "We must reach the tower." "The tower?" Eli asked, panting. Kale pointed toward the horizon, a distant mountain glowing faintly in the storm. "The heart of Vorsa, it was our last defense. If we reach it, I can awaken the planet." Eli looked at the endless armies around them and then back at Kale. "Then we'll get you there." They began their escape through the chaos. The air was thick with smoke and plasma fire. Kale shielded Eli and the others as they ran, deflecting blasts with his bare hands. Behind them, the Overlord's voices echoed like thunder. "You cannot hide from us, Kale of Vorsa. Your world belongs to us." Kale looked back once, his voice calm but cold. "Not anymore." A massive explosion erupted as they reached the desert's edge. The rebels scattered, some falling, some fighting to the end. Eli grabbed a wounded slave, dragging him to safety. Kale turned, his energy pulsing brighter. For a moment, the Overlords hesitated, sensing the ancient power awakening within him. The desert began to tremble. Cracks opened in the ground and strange blue light poured from below. The planet itself seemed to move. Kyle's voice rose over the storm. "You destroyed my people, but their memory lives in this world. And this world remembers." The Overlords shouted something in their own language, summoning their ships back to the sky. They fired beams toward the horizon, trying to destroy the ancient tower before Kale could reach it. Kale and Eli raced through the dunes, chased by fire and thunder. Each blast lit up the night like the end of the world. When they finally reached the foot of the glowing mountain, Kyle turned to Eli. "Once I begin, there will be no turning back. The planet will wake him and it will choose who lives and who burns." Eli nodded, eyes steady. "Then let's make sure it remembers who fought for it." Kale touched the stone. The surface came alive with light, symbols racing up toward the sky. The tower began to hum, deep and ancient like a sleeping god stirring after 1,000 years. High above, the Overlord fleet turned its weapons toward them. The first beam fired, a blinding white light cutting through the clouds. Kyle looked up. "Let them come," he whispered. "Vorsa is awake." The beam struck the mountain, and everything exploded in light. The light swallowed everything. For a long moment there was no sound, only brightness and silence. Then slowly the dust began to clear. The mountain still stood. The tower still rose, glowing like a heart of fire. And at its base stood Kale, his body surrounded by blue and gold light, the air vibrating with raw power. Eli blinked through the haze. "Kale," he whispered. The energy coming from the alien was almost blinding. It danced across his skin like lightning, lifting small rocks into the air. The ground trembled under his feet. The tower responded to him, each pulse of its light beating in rhythm with Kale's heartbeat. "The planet, it's alive," Eli said, his voice shaking. Kyle nodded slowly, his golden eyes glowing brighter. "It has always been alive. It only slept because we forgot its name." He pressed his palm against the tower's surface. Ancient runes ignited, spreading outward in a spiral of light that reached toward the stars. The sands around them rippled as the desert turned into glass. From deep below, a deep rumble echoed, not like thunder, but like breathing. Then Eli heard it. Faint at first, but growing louder. A sound like millions of voices whispering at once. "What is that?" he asked. Kyle's voice was steady. "The memory of my people. Their souls are part of this world. They were never truly gone." The light from the tower reached the sky, piercing through the storm clouds and striking the massive Overlord ships above. Alarms blared across their fleet. The alien commanders shouted orders in panic. "Contain the energy. Destroy the source." From the lead ship, a blinding beam fired straight toward the tower again, but this time the beam hit something invisible. A shimmering shield of energy that rippled through the sky like water. Kale's power had awakened the world's ancient defenses. The planet Vorsa began to fight back. Massive stone structures rose from beneath the sands, shaped like ancient guardians. Their eyes glowed with the same blue fire as Kale's veins. The air shimmered with energy and storms formed out of nowhere. Lightning struck the ground, tearing through the Overlord's machines. Eli stared in awe. "Kale, what are you doing?" Kale's voice sounded distant now, layered with echoes, as if more than one voice spoke through him. "I am not doing this alone. The planet remembers its protector. I am only its voice." The Overlords rained fire from the sky, but the planet's energy fields deflected their attacks. Each blast they sent returned to them doubled in strength. One ship exploded, then another, breaking apart in the sky like shattered glass. Inside the chaos, Eli saw Kale's face, calm but strained. His body shook as streams of energy coursed through him. The power was too much for one being to hold. "Kale!" Eli shouted over the storm. "Stop, it's killing you!" Kale looked at him and smiled faintly. "I was dead long ago, Eli. This is life returning." Lightning surged through his body, merging him completely with the tower's energy. The symbols of his people began appearing in the air around him, circles of light filled with their language, their history, their song. The whispers grew louder, turning into voices, then into a chant that shook the stars. From orbit, the overlords sent their final command: destroy the planet. Their flagship opened its core weapon, a sphere of white energy forming above it. Eli looked up, eyes wide. They're going to wipe everything out. Kale's voice rolled through the air, deep and powerful. Then we end it here. He raised his arms and the tower responded. Beams of blue light shot into the sky, piercing the clouds, striking the enemy fleet. The energy waves bent reality itself, twisting metal, breaking gravity. Ships crashed into one another, falling from the sky like burning stars. The world roared, not in pain but in awakening. Mountains rose where deserts had been. Rivers of light cut across the surface, carving ancient patterns once more. The heart of Vorsa beat again. Eli could barely stand against the storm of energy. He shouted through the wind, "Kale! You'll die if you keep going." Kale's form flickered, his voice echoing like thunder. Every world needs a sacrifice to live again. This is mine. Eli's throat tightened. There has to be another way. Kale looked at him, his expression soft. There is, live, tell them the truth. Tell them what we were. The tower's energy flared one last time. The light grew so bright that the sky itself turned white. Every ship in orbit shattered, every weapon melted, and the storm of sound became pure silence. Then, as the light faded, Kyle was gone. Only his voice remained in the wind. Free minds cannot be chained again. Eli fell to his knees. The tower stood quiet now, its glow dimming into calm blue. The sky was clear for the first time in centuries. The overlords were gone. The war was over. But Eli felt no victory, only loss and awe. He looked up at the tower, whispering, "Goodbye, my friend." A soft breeze passed over him, carrying the faint echo of Kale's voice, gentle and proud. Not goodbye, only beginning. And as Eli watched, the sands began to shift once more. Tiny flowers, the glowing blue, grew where Kale had stood. The planet had remembered its guardian. The war was over. The sky above Vorsa was quiet again. No ships, no fire, no thunder. Only soft clouds drifted over a planet reborn. Where once the desert stretched endless and dead, new rivers now ran through shining valleys. The air felt different, alive, like it was breathing for the first time in centuries. Eli stood alone at the base of the great tower, now silent and calm. The glow that once reached the heavens had faded into gentle blue veins across the stone, pulsing slowly like a sleeping heart. Around him, the survivors of the rebellion walked carefully among the ruins, silent, exhausted, and awed. They whispered Kale's name like a prayer. To them, he was no longer a slave or a legend or even a soldier. He was something more, the guardian of Vorsa, the one who woke a dying world. But to Eli, he was simply a friend, one who had given everything. He knelt beside the ground where Kale had vanished. The sand there glowed faintly, still warm to the touch. Blue flowers had begun to grow, strange, luminous things that shone even under sunlight. Eli touched one gently. It felt alive, like it remembered. "He did it," Eli said softly. He really did it. Behind him, a small group of freed slaves approached. One of them, a young woman with silver eyes, spoke carefully. "Captain Vance, what will we do now?" Eli looked up at the tower, its shadow stretching far across the valley. "We rebuild," he said, "but this time without chains, without masters." The woman nodded, tears in her eyes. "And Kale?" Eli smiled faintly. "Kale isn't gone. Not really. You can feel him in the wind, in the ground, in the light. He's part of this world now." They stood together in silence. The wind carried the sound of rustling leaves, something Vorsa hadn't heard in hundreds of years. Life was returning. As days turned into weeks, word spread across the galaxy. The overlords' fleets had vanished. The chains of their empire had broken. Some said it was a weapon that destroyed them. Others whispered about a man, or something like one, who commanded the power of a planet. Stories grew like wildfire. In spaceports and outposts, travelers spoke of a world once dead that now shone blue from orbit. They said its guardian had risen again, a giant of light and stone whose roar could shake the stars. Eli heard those stories as he rebuilt the settlements with the freed people. He never corrected them. Some truths he thought were stronger as legends, but sometimes when the nights were quiet and the twin moons rose high, he would walk back to the tower. He would sit by the glowing sand and talk, not to anyone there but to the memory of Cale. He told him about the farms growing again, the rivers flowing, the children laughing without fear. About the unity forming between humans and aliens, no longer slaves and masters but equals, and sometimes, when the wind blew just right, Eli could swear he heard a low, distant voice answer, a voice like thunder wrapped in calm. "Well done, Eli." One evening, while repairing a solar relay near the mountain, Eli felt the ground tremble slightly. He looked up. The tower's faint glow was pulsing again, faster now, as if the planet's heart was beating stronger. He placed his hand on the stone. "Cale, is that you?" A soft hum answered him. The symbols on the tower lit up one by one, forming a spiral of light that stretched skyward. Eli stepped back in awe. The sky flickered, and for a moment a figure appeared in the light. Tall, glowing, calm, golden eyes watching from within the radiance. Kyle. He didn't speak, but Eli understood. The message wasn't in words, it was in feeling. Protect them. Guide them. Remember what was lost, Eli nodded slowly. I will. The light faded and the tower fell silent once more. But Eli's heart felt lighter than it had in years. He finally knew Cale wasn't gone. He was watching, not as a ghost, but as the soul of a world that refused to die. Years later, stories of the man who defied them all became legend. Children of the new Vorsa grew up hearing about the human who stood beside an alien god and faced an empire without fear. Statues were built, songs were sung, and across the stars, Cale's name became a symbol of freedom. Eli never sought fame. He lived among the people, teaching, building, reminding them that freedom was not given. It was chosen and defended. And every night when he looked up at the twin moons, he saw a faint light between them, a golden shimmer moving across the sky like a guardian watching from above. He smiled each time he saw it. Somewhere deep under the sands, far below the tower, the planet's core pulsed again, stronger, brighter. In the darkness, a shadow moved, tall, powerful, alive. Kyle's eyes opened, glowing gold. The chamber around him filled with light. He looked toward the surface, toward the stars, and whispered, "They are free now." The wind outside shifted, carrying his voice across the world like a promise, soft, endless, and eternal. He was never their slave, the voice said. He was their end.